Welcome to Subject-Verb Agreement. In today's lesson, we're going to learn the strategies to attack every single sentence correction question from the easiest to the most difficult. So bear here with me. Let's begin. So remember that a sentence is a main idea, a complete message. Every sentence must have two basic elements. You need a subject and a verb. Keep that in mind, that's very important. So, what is a subject exactly? Well, usually a subject is either a person, an animal, or an object that usually performs an action. But sometimes the subject receives the action in the passive voices. We will see more about that in the verbs lesson. Okay, so again, a subject can be a person, animal, or an object. And today we're going to learn how to distinguish the subject from other nouns, okay? So, what about a verb? What is a verb? Well, most of the time, a verb in the GMAT is an action, such as run, study, work. But sometimes, the verb is a feeling or a state of being, okay? So, think about, I feel sad today. No, not really, I'm very happy and excited to do this video. You can also say, okay, she is 2 years old. Well, is there an action there? Well, not really. So keep that in mind. The verb to be is usually a state of being, not an action. And let me show you how to attack every single sentence correction question by considering the subject and the verb. Remember that you should always avoid modifiers. Okay, there is a lesson on modifiers. It's actually lesson number 2. We're going to cover a lot of details on that lesson. For today, I just want you to follow the strategy. Number 1, you need to find the subject and the verb. So, in this particular sentence, we're starting with a modifying phrase. This is a modifier that describes something. Native to South America. What is native to South America? Well, it should be peanuts. It should be peanuts. However, you have the word when in front of peanuts. And the word when subordinates the subject. In other words, one thing is to say peanuts were introduced, that's the verb, and a completely different thing is to say when peanuts were introduced. The word when in front subordinates the subject peanuts. Therefore, you do not have a complete sentence, you have a fragment. You can eliminate the first choice. We still have 4 options to go. So once you identify the subject, you know that peanuts is a subject, you need a verb. And take a look at these options. You have having been introduced, were introduced, and introduced. Only one of those is a verb. Which one is it? Well, very good. Were introduced is the only possible verb. All the other choices are modifiers. Having been introduced is called a perfect gerund. It's a special modifier that we will analyze deeper in the next lesson. And the word introduced, I know it sounds like a verb, it looks like a verb, but it isn't a verb. It is a past participle modifier. So those two are not really verbs. They describe the noun or the subject peanuts. You can eliminate those. You can also eliminate the second one. And the only answer choice left is letter C or number 3. Okay, so what is the strategy? You need to focus on the subject and the verb. Eliminate modifiers and then look for differences among the answer choices. For instance, I never mentioned this difference at the end, because of being versus because they were. And remember something, if you use because, you have 2 options. Because of plus a noun, or because subject verb. Because of being will always be incorrect. This cannot be right. Just to keep in mind. So the only ones you have left are because they were in 3 answer choices. Again, the third one was the best choice. Now let's analyze a different sentence. This is a shorter one, and I need you to think about the structure, the subject and the verb. Keep that in mind, okay? That's very important. So what's my subject here? Well, it is right here. Most of the time, the subject is at the beginning, right there. That's my subject. Quasars. Then, whenever you have subject plus something between commas, you know that the phrase between commas is a modifier. Especially if it begins with a preposition such as at, in, on, of, or any other preposition. So, you have the subject, and now you need a verb. Think about the following structure. You have a subject, modifier, and right after the second comma, you need a verb. Now the word believed, I know it looks like a verb, but it isn't. It is, again, a past participle modifier that describes quasars. So quasars, believed to be the course of galaxies in an early stage of development, is not a sentence. This is wrong. And the only possible choice, the only one with a verb, is B. Are is a verb. Some is not a verb. It is not a verb. So answer choice B is the only possible choice. Let's take a look at a different concept. The subject and the verb must agree logically. And what does that mean? Well, it means that the subject must be able to perform the action. For instance, in the first choice we saw, peanuts cannot really introduce something. So let me quickly go back to that question. Take a look. I'm gonna eliminate this. You have peanuts. Some people may think that introduced was the verb. But does that make any sense? Can peanuts do something? Can they introduce to Africa? Not really. And the same thing happened here. Can quasars believe? No, they can't. Well, that's how you know that believed is not really the verb. So, logically simply means, can the subject perform the action? So, can quasars believe? Or can peanuts introduce something? And the answer is no. So, let me show you this concept with a real GMAT question. Again, we need to find the subject and the verb. So here, you're starting with the development. Again, the preposition of starts a modifier, a prepositional phrase. And then the word that starts another modifier. So basically you have of a new jumbo rocket, that's modifier number 1. Then you have that is expected to carry the United States into its next phase of space exploration. That's modifier number 2. And then you have the verb. Will be able to deliver. Okay, that whole thing up to deliver is a verb. So will be able to deliver. But think about that. Can the development be able to deliver a heavier load of instruments? That's weird, isn't it? Look at the other choices. You have, okay, the development versus the development versus the new development versus a newly developed jumbo rocket, a newly developed jumbo rocket. Newly and developed are modifiers. The true subject is jumbo rocket. And the thing is that developments cannot deliver anything. The rocket will be able to deliver a load of instruments, not its development, okay? So we are between these two choices. Now, there are other differences that are important here. For instance, and at a lower cost versus and to cost less right here. And another one is the comparison. This is the one I care about the most. You have will be able to deliver a heavier load of instruments into orbit than the space shuttle can. You need can to establish a parallel comparison. We will learn a lot about parallelism and comparisons in the following lesson. Lesson number 3 actually. So here In E you have will be able to deliver a heavier load of instruments into orbit than the space shuttle. So the comparison here is incomplete. Actually, it sounds like you have a heavier load than the shuttle. It's comparing the load to the shuttle, and that doesn't work. Okay, and there are other issues here that we will analyze later in another lesson. So the best choice, the right comparison, was D. Okay, this was a bit more difficult than the previous question. And take a look at this one. You have the subject at the beginning again, a substance. So a substance, then derived, be careful, it's not a verb, it is a modifier. So a substance derived from the Madagascar periwinkle, then you have another which modifier, which has proved useful in decreasing mortality among young leukemia patients, and the verb is cultivated. But be careful. What is cultivated in China? Can you cultivate a substance derived from the Madagascar periwinkle, which is a plant? Or do you cultivate a derivative? Or do you cultivate the Madagascar periwinkle derivative? Or you cultivate the Madagascar periwinkle? Well, which one makes more sense to you? You need to cultivate some sort of plant. It cannot be A, B, or C. You need D or E. So the periwinkle has a derivative. Okay, very good. Now between those two, which one is better? Okay, this one is a bit easier to eliminate because if you focus on the end, you have this comma that. And that is always incorrect because the word that introduces a relative clause modifier, and you cannot have a comma before that when that is a modifier. Okay? Also, it seems to imply that you have patience that is cultivated. That's horrible. This is incorrect, and you keep the last one. Okay, very good. Now, the final concept is that the subject and the verb must agree in number. And usually this is pretty straightforward, very easy to understand, but there are certain tricks. There are some tricky subjects. Usually, the rule is that a singular subject requires a singular verb, and a plural subject requires a plural verb. But sometimes you have some things that sound plural, but they're actually singular, and vice versa. So for example, if you think about each of Hemingway's wives, does that sound plural or singular to you? Well, for most people, it sounds plural because the word wives looks plural. However, each of whatever is always singular. Each of my friends is. The same with everyone. Every one of them is. So here you have each of Hemingway's wives, and that's singular. I cannot use where. That's incorrect. Whatever is between dashes, okay, whatever is between dashes is a modifier. You need to get rid of it, okay? Eliminate that. In B, you have everything good so far. The subject is compound subject, that's plural, and the verb is plural as well. However, I don't like the modifier between dashes because it says that each of them are wives. And each of them cannot be wives. Each is singular. In C, you have Hemingway's wives. That's my subject. And what is the verb? Well, apparently you don't have any because if you get rid of this, oh, it's right here. That's the verb. It's actually perfect. Hemingway's wives were. Okay, that works. I don't see anything wrong in C. What about the fourth one? Strong and interesting women. That's my subject. You get rid of the modifier between dashes. That's out. And then you have each a wife. And that's incorrect. If you have a subject, then a modifier, you need a verb. Apparently, they are creating a new subject here. Each a wife of Hemingway was. And that doesn't work. And in the last one you have strong and interesting women. That's my subject. Get rid of the modifier between dashes. And you're expecting a verb, not everyone. So strong and interesting women were, or something like that. And this is incorrect. The best choice is number 3. So finally, I added this very difficult question. And sometimes the GMAT will reverse the order of the subject verb. In other words, instead of saying I eat, you'll have something like eat I. Yeah, it sounds like Yoda, doesn't it? Okay, so remember something. Out of will always be a modifier. Out of America's fascination with all things antique. That's a long modifier. Usually, what follows a preposition such as of will never be the subject, so fascination is not the subject. What follows a preposition such as with cannot be the subject either, so all things antique is not the subject. But look, you have a verb right here. Have grown. What have grown? A market. Have grown a market. But that's incorrect because a market is singular. So I cannot use have. I need has. Has. Not have. And then if you look at the split at the end, you have that are bringing. Are bringing versus is bringing versus that bring versus are bringing versus bring. Now ask yourself, what are bringing? What are bringing back the chaise lounge, the overstuffed sofa, and the claw-footed bathtub? Something has to be bringing that. And the only thing that makes sense with that, remember logical agreement, the only thing that makes sense is a market. A market is bringing. I cannot use are. Okay, this was already gone. This one could work. You have is. That bring doesn't work. Are bringing doesn't work. That bring doesn't work. Okay, so B was the only possible choice. So as you can see, sometimes the order of the subject verb will be reversed. Okay, so far we have reviewed 3 basic concepts. The first one is that the subject and the verb must always exist. Second one is that the subject and the verb must agree logically. They have to make sense together. Finally, the subject and the verb must agree in number. Singular with singular, plural with plural. Okay? So that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any question or doubt, feel free to email me at verbal@gmatdudes.com. Thank you and have a wonderful day.